The Pacific roared just beyond the sheer granite cliffs of the Thorne Estate, its ceaseless rhythm a profound, ancient heartbeat against the polished, age-old stone. Inside, the sound of Julian Thorne's voice cut through the grand foyer like a honed blade, sharp and utterly commanding, each syllable echoing off the imported marble and soaring vaulted ceilings. "You're telling me now, less than an hour before the entire city descends upon my grandfather's legacy?" He paced, his bespoke Italian loafers clicking a furious staccato against the intricate floor. The phone pressed so tightly to his ear that the cold metal might as well have fused with his skin. "No, Camille, this isn't just another socialite spectacle. This is for my grandfather's entire life's work, the Thorne and Sons publishing empire, and the merger that keeps this company, my company, alive." His jaw, usually a chiseled picture of unwavering resolve, tightened into a taut line as the call ended with a cold digital beep. He stared at the screen. The stark word ended, mocking him, a stark epitaph to his meticulously planned evening. Julian raked a hand through his dark, immaculately trimmed hair, his tailored navy suit, usually a symbol of his power, suddenly feeling like an inescapable straitjacket. Weeks ago, Camille Dubois, his ex-fiancée, a woman whose beauty was as striking as her ambition, had coolly agreed to play the part of his devoted future wife for this single, crucial night. It was a charade, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to satisfy his ailing grandfather's singular dying wish, to see Julian settled, to see the Thorne lineage secure, before he signed off on the trust fund that anchored the family's wealth, and, more critically, to greenlight a monumental merger that hinged entirely on the Thorne family's impeccable, almost mythological public image. Now, with the gilded gates about to swing open and a who's who of industry titans expected, Camille had bailed, leaving Julian not just stranded, but utterly submerged in a turbulent sea of expectations and impending failure. His grandfather, Silas Thorne, a man whose presence, even in his frailty, could command a room, had made his ultimatum crystal clear. No fiancé, no trust fund, no merger. Julian's carefully constructed empire, built meticulously on years of calculated moves, shrewd negotiations, and ruthless dedication, was now teetering precariously on the very edge of collapse, a house of cards buffeted by an unforeseen storm. A sharp, distinct crash, like 1,000 brittle stars shattering, ripped through the oppressive silence of Julian's spiraling thoughts. He spun, his eyes, usually cool and analytical, now wide with a fresh surge of panic, landing on a young woman standing frozen by the ornate mahogany bar. A silver serving tray lay at her feet, its contents scattered like glittering debris, shattered glass glinting wickedly in a shimmering pool of spilled champagne, reflecting the high chandeliers in a distorted mosaic. Her pristine white apron, meant to be starched and neat, was askew, almost comical in its disarray, and her hands, still trembling, hovered uselessly as she knelt, a picture of quiet desperation, to begin the futile task of cleaning the mess. Her name, he vaguely recalled from the temp agency's roster, was Elara Vance. He'd hired her for the intricate pre-gala preparations, a quiet, unassuming girl, almost ethereal, who seemed to blend effortlessly into the background, like a forgotten shadow in a grand house. Until now. I'm so incredibly sorry," Elara stammered, her voice a fragile whisper, barely audible above the distant roar of the ocean as she frantically scrambled to gather the treacherous shards. Her cheeks, pale moments before, flushed a vibrant, mortified pink, and her hazel eyes, wide with raw panic, darted between the glistening mess and Julian's formidable presence. I didn't mean to." "It's fine," Julian interjected, the words escaping his lips softer, surprisingly, than he had intended, the sharp edge of his earlier frustration blunted by the sheer vulnerability he saw in her. He crossed the opulent room in a few swift strides, the click of his shoes, now deliberate, not angry, and crouched beside her, the scent of spilled champagne mingling with the faint aroma of lilies from a nearby floral arrangement. "Forget the champagne. Leave it." She blinked, startled, her eyes widening further at his unexpected gentleness, her fingers still clutching a broken flute, its sharp edge a testament to her trembling. "I'll clean it all up, Mr. Thorne. I swear I will. I can fetch another tray, another bottle." He studied her, really studied her for the first time. Her blonde hair, usually meticulously contained in a neat bun, now escaping in wispy tendrils around her flushed face. A faint, almost endearing smudge of flour on her cheek from some earlier frantic kitchen task. Her hands, usually so capable, now scraped and red from the fall. She was no Camille. She was no polished socialite, no match for the glittering, cutthroat world he navigated, a world of calculated smiles and veiled intentions. Yet, as she fumbled with the delicate glass, a sudden, resonant echo of his grandfather's gravelly voice reverberated in his mind, clear as if Silas were standing right beside him. "I don't want some dazzling trophy, Julian. I want someone who loves you, truly, someone who sees beyond the Thorne name and the Thorne wealth." The thought, unbidden, was like a strange key turning in a locked door. "Elara, right?" he asked, his voice softening further, the name feeling surprisingly natural on his tongue. She nodded, her cheeks reddening even more, a faint blush traveling down her slender neck. "Yes, sir." He hesitated, the sheer audacity of his next words pressing heavily against his chest, a strange concoction of desperation and a nascent, utterly illogical hope. He stood, towering over her, yet feeling profoundly vulnerable. "This is going to sound completely unhinged," he began slowly, each word a hesitant step into the unknown. "But I need your help tonight. Desperately." Her brow furrowed, a delicate crease appearing between her eyes, confusion flickering like a candle flame in their hazel depths. She pushed a stray blonde curl behind her ear, her gaze searching his. "Help? With what, Mr. Thorne? I can get more champagne or call for a cleanup crew. I need you to pretend to be my fiancé. Just for a few hours. Just for this gala." The words hung in the opulent air, ludicrous, impossible. Her mouth, a delicate curve, parted slightly, then snapped shut, as if she were a fish out of water, gasping for sense. Her wide eyes scrutinized him, searching for any hint of a joke, a trick, a cruel whim. You want me? Why?" The question was pure, unadulterated disbelief. "Because you're here," he said, the raw honesty in his voice startling even himself, a stark contrast to his usual carefully curated persona. "And because you don't know me well enough to fake anything. You couldn't possibly fake it. I need someone real, someone completely unburdened by expectations." Elara stared at him, her expression a peculiar, captivating mix of disbelief, a dawning amusement, and a profound, almost innocent pity. That's a terrible reason," she stated, her voice regaining a touch of its natural timbre, a hint of steel beneath the initial stammer. He let out a short, nervous, utterly uncharacteristic laugh, a sound that felt alien in the grand foyer. "It's all I've got, Elara. My grandfather, Silas, he's dying. He won't sign over the trust. He won't give his blessing to this merger unless he truly believes I've found someone who cares, someone who genuinely cares. I was going to fake it with someone else, with Camille, but..." He trailed off, the bitterness of that betrayal still sharp. Meeting her gaze, seeing a flicker of something he hadn't expected. Understanding, perhaps. Maybe you don't have to fake it. Just be you. Be kind. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting nervously to the ornate gilded clock on the wall above the fireplace. 47 minutes, less than an hour until the gala. Her mind raced, a whirlwind of doubt, fear, and a strange burgeoning curiosity. She wasn't built for this. Lies, luxury, the blinding spotlight. She was a woman of quiet truths, of simple, honest labor. But something in his eyes, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker of vulnerability beneath the layers of CEO armor, of detached power, made her pause. A strange sense of connection, of shared human frailty washed over her. "Okay," she said quietly, the word barely a breath. "I'll do it, but only because you asked, like you actually needed me, not like I was just another staff member." For the first time that day, perhaps in weeks, Julian's shoulders visibly relaxed, the tension draining from his rigid frame. A genuine smile, untainted by calculation or expectation, broke through his usually reserved expression. Not for the cameras, not for the deal, not for the facade. This smile was for her. It was real. The dress, unearthed from a forgotten storage closet of vintage gowns in the estate's sprawling wardrobe wing, was a whisper of ethereal elegance. Pale lavender silk, flowing like liquid moonlight, with delicate, almost invisible embroidery of silver thread, it clung to Elara's frame with an unexpected grace. It was a little loose at the shoulders, perhaps, and the hem, a cascade of fabric, brushed the polished floor, but it transformed her. She stood before a gilded mirror in a quiet guest room, her breath catching in her throat, a soft gasp escaping her lips as she smoothed the exquisitely fine fabric. She wasn't glamorous, not in the way the sharp-edged, impeccably groomed women Julian usually surrounded himself with were glamorous. She didn't possess their polished sheen or their practiced poise. But the reflection staring back at her, a stranger in a shimmering gown, felt like someone who might belong in this glittering world, if only for a single fleeting night. Beneath the borrowed beauty, though, a familiar ache settled deep in her chest. Her heart condition, a shadow she'd carried since childhood, a silent, relentless companion, had worsened over the years. Her last doctor's visit, weeks ago, had been blunt, devastatingly so. Without a transplant, her time was running out. She hadn't told anyone at Thorne Estate. Why burden a temporary job, a fleeting charade, with a truth that heavy, that insurmountable? She was just a temp, after all. A soft, hesitant knock at the door startled her, pulling her back from the precipice of her private fears. "Elara?" Julian's voice, warm and urgent, tinged with a faint anxiety. She opened the door, her heart hammering not from exertion, but from a burgeoning sense of nervous anticipation. His eyes, usually so guarded, widened, searching her face, taking in the transformation. "You look," he faltered, the typical CEO patter failing him for once. Then a slow, genuine smile spread across his lips, erasing the last vestiges of his earlier stress. Like someone people could believe in, someone real. She gave a shy, self-conscious laugh, tugging slightly at the exquisite dress, feeling like a child caught raiding her mother's closet. I feel like I'm playing dress-up, like I'll trip over the hem and expose myself." "You're not," he said, his voice firm, unwavering. "You're saving me tonight. You're saving us." The unspoken us hung in the air, a fleeting glimpse of something profound. Downstairs, the gala was a mesmerizing vision of carefully curated decadence. Crystal chandeliers, suspended like constellations, cast a warm, golden light over tables draped in cascades of ivory linens, adorned with towering floral arrangements of blush peonies and fragrant white roses. A string quartet, positioned discreetly in a corner, played softly, their classical melodies weaving a soothing counterpoint to the growing hum of conversation. Guests, draped in designer attire, swirled through the opulent room like exotic, iridescent fish in a grand aquarium. Julian offered Elara his arm, his gesture formal yet surprisingly gentle, and she felt her hand tremble slightly against the fine wool of his sleeve as they stepped into the dazzling fray. "You okay?" he whispered, his voice low, intimate, meant only for her. "Trying to be," she murmured back, her smile wobbly but determined, her eyes darting nervously around the overwhelming crowd. The sheer scale of it all, the wealth, the casual confidence of the guests, was dizzying. He introduced her with a quiet, almost understated pride, a subtle warmth in his tone that surprised even her. "My fiancée, Elara Vance." She nodded politely, a quick, almost imperceptible dip of her head, stumbled over a curtsy once, caught in the unexpected formality of a bowing financer, and laughed a little too loudly at a particularly dry, erudite joke from a visiting literary agent. Each time she faltered, each time a wave of self-consciousness threatened to swallow her whole, Julian's hand, resting lightly on her elbow or brushing subtly against hers, was there, a silent, unwavering anchor, steadying her. He guided her, not with a controlling grip, but with a reassuring presence. When the glittering room, with its cacophony of voices and the relentless pressure of constant scrutiny, the air thick with perfume and unspoken judgments, she found herself craving a moment of quiet, a breath of normal air. She slipped away, drawn by an almost magnetic pull to the familiar, comforting hum of the kitchen. The catering staff, a bustling army of quiet efficiency, barely noticed her, just another figure in the orchestrated chaos, a fleeting shadow in a lavender gown. It was a relief, a small, unexpected sanctuary. So, without thinking, she tied her hair back with a stray ribbon found on a counter, her expensive dress now partially obscured by an impromptu apron borrowed from a bewildered junior cook, and started helping. She arranged delicate canapés onto silver trays with nimble fingers, folded crisp linen napkins into perfect architectural squares, and listened with genuine interest as Isabella, the head chef, grumbled about a crucial late delivery of fresh scallops. When a young, clearly overwhelmed server, barely out of culinary school, dropped an entire tray of perfectly grilled shrimp, the porcelain platter shattering with a sickening crunch, Elara was the first to kneel beside him, not with judgment, but with quiet, genuine empathy, whispering, "It's okay. Accidents happen. We've got this. Let's get you a new tray." Julian found her later, not by the roaring fireplace or mingling with the titans of industry, but in a small, tucked-away garden alcove, laughing genuinely with Elias, the grizzled, kind-eyed head gardener, about the precise soil pH required for the estate's prized herb beds. She was holding a small terracotta pot, her elegant dress somehow not out of place amidst the rich earth and aromatic greenery. He didn't interrupt, didn't call out her name. He just watched, a strange, profound warmth settling in his chest, expanding beyond the confines of his usual self-possession. This wasn't part of the meticulously crafted plan, wasn't in any of the countless contingency scenarios he'd mentally prepared. Yet it felt profoundly, unequivocally right. Her uninhibited ease, her unpolished, authentic kindness, radiating like a soft, steady glow. At the gala's close, long after most guests had departed, leaving behind a lingering scent of expensive perfume and success, Silas Thorne, frail but his eyes still sharp as a hawk's, sat in his favorite worn leather armchair in the library, a sentinel overseeing his domain. Julian, feeling a nervous tremor he hadn't experienced since his first major business pitch, brought Elara to meet him. The old man, his face etched with the wisdom of decades, took Elara's hand, his grip surprisingly strong, almost paternal, as he studied her. "So," he said, his voice gravelly but imbued with an unexpected warmth, a tone Julian rarely heard directed at anyone other than his late wife. "You're the one who finally managed to tether my notoriously flighty grandson." Elara's voice, though she tried to steady it, trembled slightly. I hope I'm doing this right, sir." She worried her honesty would be perceived as awkwardness, her earnestness as naivete. Silas studied her, his gaze lingering, not on her borrowed gown or the faint flush on her cheeks, but on her slightly calloused hands that clearly knew hard work, and her earnest, utterly guileless smile. He saw the flour smudge, the faint lines of genuine kindness around her eyes. "You're not like the others, child," he said softly, his voice dropping to a near whisper, a profound statement that resonated with the weight of years and countless encounters with superficiality. "You're not pretending. You're real." Julian froze, the words failing him, a cold dread washing over him, convinced Silas had seen through the charade, had understood it all along. Elara, her cheeks flushing even deeper, wasn't sure if she had passed or failed this ultimate, unexpected test. Had she given it away? Had she ruined everything? But then, Silas, his wise old eyes twinkling with an almost imperceptible hint of a smile, squeezed her hand, a gesture of profound approval. "Hold on to her, Julian," he said, his tone firm, unwavering, his voice carrying the weight of a lifetime of judgment and observation. "She's here for you, not for your name, not for Thorne & Sons, for you." Elara's heart raced, a frenetic drumbeat in her chest, not from her condition, but from the sudden, overwhelming weight of being seen, truly seen, understood, and accepted for the first time in years. A wave of unexpected emotion washed over her, a feeling of belonging that transcended the temporary nature of her role. Breakfast at the Thorne Estate was less a meal and more a sacred ritual, served precisely at 7:30 a.m., under a soaring vaulted ceiling where sunlight, filtered through centuries-old stained glass panels depicting scenes of literary triumph, streamed down in kaleidoscopic patterns. Elara sat at the very edge of a plush, cushioned armchair, her hands folded tightly in her lap, trying desperately not to fidget, her newfound confidence from the night before struggling against the ingrained deference of her position. Servers, moving with ghost-like efficiency, placed plates of perfectly poached eggs, crisp bacon, and golden brioche before her, each movement meticulously choreographed. Across the gleaming antique mahogany table, Julian, already immersed in the unforgiving world of business, reviewed contracts on his tablet, his focus unbroken, his presence a demanding anchor in the otherwise serene room. To his right, Silas Thorne, perched regally in his armchair, sipped his espresso from a delicate bone china cup, his presence commanding despite his increasingly frail frame, his eyes missing nothing. Elara stirred her tea, the gentle clink of her spoon against the porcelain cup sounding impossibly loud in the otherwise hushed silence. This world, its immense wealth, its ancient rules, its unspoken hierarchies, wasn't hers. She was here for Julian, for the promise of a paycheck, a substantial sum that, if stretched carefully, might just cover her next hospital bill, for a chance to keep going, to buy herself a little more time. Later that morning, finding herself drawn by a strange, almost gravitational pull to the honest bustling of the kitchen, Elara found Isabella, the head cook, wrestling with a particularly tricky soufflé recipe. "They'll complain it's not fluffy enough," Isabella muttered, wiping a streak of flour from her brow with the back of her hand, her frustration palpable. "The Thorne standards, they are like granite. Want to try my mom's trick?" Elara offered, her voice soft, unassuming, as she instinctively rolled up the sleeves of her casual blouse. "A tiny pinch of cream of tartar. It stabilizes the egg whites perfectly, makes them hold their structure. Foolproof, almost." By lunchtime, the kitchen, usually a place of strict hierarchy, buzzed with an unusual lightness. Elara and Isabella were laughing freely, swapping stories about old family recipes, the kind passed down through generations, steeped in love and memory. Elara showed Isabella how to pipe meringue into delicate, tiny stars, a skill she'd learned years ago in a childhood baking class. And when the soufflés, against all odds, rose perfectly, golden and impossibly fluffy, Isabella hugged her tightly, a rare show of affection. "You're a lifesaver, kid, a miracle worker." Elara didn't stop there. Over the next few days, she became a quiet, benevolent force within the estate. She folded crisp linen napkins into intricate lotus shapes for the staff's break room table, a small gesture of beauty for those who rarely saw it. She left a handwritten note for Elias, the groundskeeper, praising his magnificent roses, a detail Julian himself had never noticed. She spent an hour with Helena, the meticulous head housekeeper, helping her bewildered young daughter, Lily, braid her unruly hair into elaborate French plaits, sharing stories that made the little girl giggle. Elara wasn't trying to win anyone over, wasn't trying to manipulate or impress. She was simply leaving quiet traces of kindness, like pebbles scattered on a path, creating small ripples of warmth in the vast, often impersonal expanse of the estate. Julian watched from his expansive office window, high above the manicured gardens, noticing how effortlessly she moved through the complex ecosystem of the estate, her quiet gestures subtly, yet profoundly, shifting the very atmosphere. He began to see her not just as a solution, but as a presence. One morning, while helping Helena meticulously polish the estate's vast collection of antique silver in the cavernous dining room, Elara paused as Silas Thorne entered, his heavy cane tapping a rhythmic cadence on the parquet floor. "Helena, a moment alone, please," he said, his voice cool and clear, but not unkind, his gaze sweeping over the scene. Helena, sensing the unspoken command, slipped out, leaving Elara suddenly acutely aware of the profound silence that descended upon the room. The only sound was the distant caw of a crow. Silas coughed, a sharp, unsteady sound that seemed to reverberate in the vast space. And as he did, a heavy, intricately engraved silver pocket watch slipped from his wrist, clattering with a metallic thud to the polished floor. Elara hesitated for only a fraction of a second, then, without thinking, knelt to retrieve it, her fingers brushing the cool antique metal. She polished it gently on the cuff of her sleeve, removing the faint smudge of dust, before holding it out to him, her gaze steady, respectful. "This deserves a better place, sir," she said, her voice soft but firm. Silas's eyes, usually so sharp, narrowed, scrutinizing her. a hint of something unreadable in their depths. Most young people, he observed, his voice a low, knowing rumble, would have slipped it into their pocket just to see if an old man would notice, to test the waters. Elara smiled, her sincerity unwavering. "Then I'm not most people, sir." He took the watch from her outstretched hand, his expression still unreadable, a complex tapestry of thought behind his eyes. He weighed the watch in his palm, then looked at her, a faint, almost imperceptible ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "No," he said, quietly, his voice carrying the weight of profound understanding. "You're not." The test, she realized, had both subtle and absolute. Days, then weeks, turned into a strange, beautiful rhythm. The charade, initially a source of relentless tension, began to feel less like a performance and more like a quiet dance. Julian and Elara found themselves planning the upcoming engagement party in earnest, the grand event that would solidify the merger and ensure Silas's peace of mind. Their discussions, initially stiff and formal, evolved into surprisingly spirited debates. Julian, ever the connoisseur of classic elegance, argued for towering arrangements of pristine peonies and the refined strains of a classical quartet. Elara, with her innate warmth and unexpected practicality, pushed for bold, vibrant dahlias in riotous colors and the soulful improvisations of a jazz ensemble. "Dahlias," she'd insisted one afternoon, her eyes sparkling with conviction, a grin spreading across her face. "They're bold, not fussy. They have character. They don't try to be something they're not." He relented, charmed by her conviction, by the genuine passion she brought to even the most mundane detail. He found himself not only accepting her choices, but actually liking them, a revelation that shook his meticulously organized world. In the sprawling, leather-bound library, filled with the scent of aged paper and wisdom, Elara often found herself beside Silas, helping him sort through decades of inherited books, the literary legacy of Thorne & Sons. She would read aloud from faded, beloved novels, her voice soft and melodious, while he listened, his eyes closed, his frail hands resting lightly on the pages, lost in the vivid tapestry of memory. One afternoon, caught in the rhythm of the narrative, she misread a line, a small, endearing stumble over a particularly archaic word, and giggled, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. Silas's laugh, a rare, startling sound, deep and resonant like the thrum of an ancient cello, filled the stately room, shattering the usual quiet, bringing a lightness Julian had rarely heard from his stoic grandfather. Julian, passing by the open library door, frozen in his tracks by the unexpected sound, felt his own heart catch, a strange, profound emotion blooming in his chest. It wasn't just a sound, it was a revelation. Elara had brought light into the deepest, most quiet corners of their lives. That night, the gentle rhythm of their burgeoning connection was brutally interrupted. Elara's heart condition, a relentless shadow she diligently tried to ignore, flared with an intensity she hadn't experienced in years. A searing, relentless pain radiated through her chest, sharp and merciless, an icy grip tightening around her lungs. She sank onto her bed, clutching the opulent covers, her breath shallow, each gasping inhale a monumental effort, her hands shaking violently. A knock came, Julian's voice, urgent, tinged with a sudden acute fear. "Elara, are you all right? I heard something." She couldn't answer. The door opened, and he was beside her in an instant, his face pale as he saw her ashen complexion, the alarming graying of her lips. "What's wrong? What is it?" She clutched his arm, her grip surprisingly strong despite her weakness, unable to articulate the words, the pain stealing her voice, her consciousness ebbing. He didn't hesitate. All the CEO's calculated moves, all the boardroom strategies vanished. Instinct took over. He scooped her into his arms, her weight surprisingly light, and raced through the opulent halls, shouting for his driver, the pristine calm of the estate shattered by his desperate urgency. At the hospital, the sterile, bright lights were a stark contrast to the soft glow of the estate. He stayed by her side, a silent, unmoving sentinel, until nurses, their faces kind but firm, gently forced him back, needing to work. Hours later, the doctor emerged, his face grave, but then mercifully relaxing. Stable. A severe arrhythmia episode. She'll need extensive monitoring, and we'll be putting her higher on the transplant list. Julian exhaled a ragged, shuddering breath, relief crashing through him with the force of a tidal wave, leaving him weak-kneed. He walked back into her room, the scent of antiseptic jarring. Inside, Elara looked fragile, impossibly so, but undeniably alive, a faint, almost ghost-like smile gracing her lips when she saw him. "You stayed," she whispered, her voice barely a thread. "Of course I did," he said, his voice raw with emotion, a startling vulnerability in his usually controlled tone. "Where else would I be?" A few days later, in the warm, fragrant sanctuary of the conservatory, bathed in the gentle light filtering through the glass roof, Elara sat with Silas Thorne, pouring tea with hands that, though no longer trembling from illness, were still unsteady from the lingering weakness. The air was thick with the scent of orchids and damp earth. "I have to tell you something, sir," she began, her voice trembling, not from weakness this time, but from the immense weight of her confession. "I have a heart condition. I've been on a transplant list for over a year now, waiting. This whole arrangement, coming here, it was supposed to be temporary, a way to earn enough to manage my bills, to just get by. I didn't expect to feel at home here. I didn't expect to care." The last words were a whisper, tears beginning to fall, tracing paths down her cheeks. Silas listened, his silence gentle, compassionate, his gaze unwavering, betraying no shock, no surprise. He had, perhaps, always seen more than he let on. "What do you want from this life, Elara?" he asked, his voice soft, profound, cutting through the layers of pretense and circumstance. "To be seen," she said, the tears now flowing freely, a torrent of raw, unburdened truth. "To matter, even if just for a moment. To feel like I leave some small mark." Silas reached across the delicate porcelain teacups and took her hand, his ancient fingers closing gently around hers. "You've brought more light to this house, more genuine warmth than anyone has in years, child," he said, his eyes filled with a deep, knowing tenderness. "You matter more than you know, to all of us." The engagement party, held weeks later, was a vision of vibrant life, a celebration that defied expectation. Dahlias, Elara's bold, beautiful dahlias, bloomed in riotous full color, their velvety petals reflecting the soft glow of countless fairy lights strung under a vast canopy. Jazz, Elara's chosen jazz, drifted through the crisp evening air, its improvisational melodies filling the estate with a joyous, spontaneous energy. Elara, luminous, in a soft ivory gown, its delicate lace shimmering under the lights, walked slowly, deliberately toward Julian, her steps light, her heart full. His vows, initially intended purely for show, for the benefit of Silas and the assembled power brokers, now carried a profound weight, a truth neither of them could ignore, could deny. "You've changed everything, Elara," he said, his voice raw with emotion, his eyes fixed on hers, a world of unspoken tenderness in their depths. "This isn't pretend anymore. It hasn't been for a long time." He slid a ring onto her finger, not the heavy, traditional diamond of old money, but a delicate, unique piece, reflecting the complex, understated beauty he had come to see in her. The crowd's polite applause faded into a distant hum as Elara nodded, tears streaming freely down her face, not of sadness, but of pure, overflowing joy. 2 months later, the impossible happened. Elara returned from the hospital, walking slowly, deliberately, a new heart beating strong and steady in her chest, a profound gift of life. Julian met her at the grand entrance, not with the formality of his usual demeanor, but with a bouquet of vibrant blue hydrangeas, his eyes full of quiet hope, of a future he hadn't dared to imagine. Silas, leaning heavily on his cane, his face thinner, but his eyes still bright with life, welcomed her home, a tear glistening in his own eye. Later that day, in the quiet sanctity of his study, the rich scent of leather and old books enveloping them, Julian held out a small velvet ring box. "This isn't about legacy or a merger, Elara," he said, his voice steady, earnest. "This is about tomorrow, about a future we build, just us, if you'll have me." "I choose you, Julian," Elara whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for his, her fingers intertwining with his, a silent promise. "Always." Elara and Julian's story isn't about grand gestures or perfectly executed plans. It's a testament to the profound courage it takes to be truly real, to strip away the facades, and to choose love when life feels impossibly fragile. It's about finding a home not in a grand estate, but in the heart of the person who truly sees you, who accepts your flaws, your vulnerabilities, and celebrates your unvarnished kindness. It reminds us that often the most extraordinary connections are found in the most unexpected places, emerging from moments of chaos and desperation. What if you allowed yourself to be seen today, to drop the pretense, to share a genuine smile, a moment of vulnerability? Who in your life deserves a moment of your kindness, a gesture that simply says, "I see you, I value you, you matter"? Take a chance, leave a heartfelt note, offer a genuine compliment, plant a small seed of connection with someone you least expect. And may you always find health, abundant hope, and a profound sense of home in the unexpected corners of your life. Remember, every heartbeat is a gift, a chance to live fully, love deeply, and connect authentically.